Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Hello, and welcome to today's program, Volunteering and Your Professional Development. My name is Maribel Mendoza, and I'll be serving as your host and moderator for today. To share a little bit about me, I'm a founder and social impact consultant focused on change through empowering entrepreneurs, especially those that have been traditionally underserved. I volunteer in my church community, locally through our United Way chapter, and for MIT, I volunteer as an EC and with the Latino Alumni of MIT, also known as LAMT. Today's webinar is live. Throughout the broadcast, you can type your questions in the Q&A box on your toolbar. We'll hold all the questions toward the end of the program. I'd now like to introduce you to our panelists. I'll share a brief overview of their professional and volunteer experience, and full bios are available at the event registration page, which you saw when you registered, but we'll drop those in the link in the chat as well. All right, so today we'll be hearing from some fantastic panelists. Colleen Smith, class of '87, Stephen Projan, class of '84, Katia Paramonova, class of '13, and Jazlyn Carvajal, class of '03. A firm believer in volunteer where you are, Colleen's volunteer service has supported a variety of groups and institutions. In addition to her work as an MIT educational counselor, Colleen currently serves on the Association of MIT Alumni, AMITA, on their board as their archivists and volunteers with the AMITA Web Committee. Dr. Steve Projan currently works as a consultant and scientific advisor in the biopharmaceutical industry, as well as with public-private partnerships, mainly in infectious disease research. Steve is currently an active volunteer with MIT's Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, known as UPOP. Katia is the co-founder and CEO of Centrally, the networks-based solution for companies to find partners, featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 for 2021. Prior to Centrally, Katia was the first director of deployment at Vecna Robotics, a Series B company leading logistics automation with autonomous robots. Katia is co-president of the MIT Alumni Club of San Diego. Jazlyn is a senior project manager leading the project and construction management group at WebCore Builders in the San Francisco Bay Area. She is co-founder of the Latinas in STEM Foundation, a national nonprofit. Jazlyn has volunteered with the class of 2003 Reunion Committee, Educational Council, and the Latina Alumni of MIT Association. She is also the past president of the MIT Club of Northern New Jersey. So thank you to all our panelists for your participation. Let's get started. Today, we're here to talk about volunteering and your professional development. Volunteering is often seen as a generous act. A person gives their time, their skills, their experience, and their passion to others without really expecting anything in return. And while volunteering is a form of service, many volunteers will tell you that you often get more than you give. And this certainly rings true for our panelists today. No matter where you are in your professional path, the need for new skills and areas of expertise changes as we advance. Our panel today will share how they use their volunteer experiences, not only as a way to give back, but also as a way to build and develop new skills and to make impactful professional relationships. With that, let's get the conversation started. So first, I'd like each panelist to speak briefly about your experience as a volunteer and the organizations that you volunteer with. Colleen, let's hear from you first.
Hi, thank you, Maribel. As Maribel mentioned in my bio, I'm a firm believer in volunteer where you are, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be your neighborhood. It can also represent where you are in life. When my children and family were young, I worked as a family readiness group leader in my husband's Army Reserve unit. My job was to make sure that families were connected and supported during deployment, something that was very near and dear to my heart during that time frame in the early 2000s. Later, as my kids grew older, I became active in the Science Olympiad program that many of you may have participated in as students. And with the help of the MIT Club of South Texas, I was able to organize and run 3 nationally sanctioned Science Olympiad tournaments in my own backyard. Later, as my youngest finally headed off to college herself, I decided it was time to give back to women and support women in STEM, especially. So when an email came through that said AMITA was looking for web committee members, I signed up. And a year later, I ran for archivist in their board of directors. And as mentioned, I'm also an EC because I love to work. I mean, Science Olympiad did not cure me of enjoying preteens and teens. So I also enjoy my work as an EC with MIT. Thank you. Jazlyn?
Hi, everyone. For me, I've always been purpose-driven, and I've always enjoyed giving back to my community and especially helping others succeed, and have been an active volunteer since I was a young child at MIT, and then post MIT a few years after graduating, when the MIT Alumni Association approached me to volunteer with the MIT Club of Northern New Jersey. I couldn't help but say yes. And I served on the MIT Club of Northern New Jersey board from 2006 till about December of 2019, when I moved across the country to California. Out of that group, it was a fun group. I had helped really build my network. I gained a couple of new mentors and definitely developed lifelong friendships. In July, I'm happy to announce that I will begin a 3-year term with the MIT Alumni Association's Board of Directors. So very excited to get that started this year. And finally, as Maribel mentioned, I am also co-founder of Latinas in STEM. It's an organization that was co-founded by MIT alumni. And our mission is to inspire and empower Latinas to pursue and thrive in STEM fields. With that organization, we have worked across the country in underserved communities, inspiring children and families to pursue STEM careers. We've developed a network of phenomenal women across the country that are doing phenomenal work across every industry in STEM. And it's just been amazing since to be working with this organization. And I believe, Stephen, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Jazlyn. As the, I guess, the elder statesman of the panelists, being born, graduating before 2 of the other panelists were born, it's kind of humbling. I think I learned social media from the students at UPOP that I served as a mentor for and still do. And I think later I'll discuss the opportunities mentoring for UPOP provided me. I was inspired to mentor and work with younger people. The fact that I received speech therapy as a stutterer and was tutored to read as a dyslexic. And I think that taught me how important it was when people gave to me, and what I thought was an important thing for me to give back to them. And as Maribel said, I work in infectious disease, so I became very popular over the last year. It has been a very large commitment of time working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the European Medicines Agency, the Food and Drug Administration, and various biotechs. But it's nice to know that I did develop some skill sets and some connections that allowed me to help contribute to the global work against SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. And who do we have next? I think it's Katya.
Cool, thanks. So yeah, I'm Katya, class of 2013. I think as a lot of volunteers, I started being with an educational counselor. It's sort of the easy way to get started with volunteering, and super fulfilling to interview prospective students and just see where the Institute is at. I'm still an EC many years down the road as well. And then the next experience I had, so my volunteer journey has been really focused on like connecting with people and building communities. So I was one of the chairs for our Pi reunion committee, which was super fun to both organize as well as try to reach out to different groups within my class to invite them down. The next couple of experiences that I've had have been super thematically focused. So I moved to San Diego 2 years ago and didn't really know too many people here, so decided to get involved with the club, first as the VP of MIT 10, and then now co-president of the club to really foster the community here and really reach out to different groups in San Diego too. Another group that I really have been enjoyed volunteering with has been the MIT 10 committee. So I get to see fellow classmates once a month. It's a small group of about 20-ish folks. And we just chat about, young alumni interests and sort of advise the Alumni Association as to what could be of interest to us and how to best support us. And then the last thing has been the Club of Northern California Startup Track, which has been a much more professionally driven group for me to make connections with other fellow entrepreneurs and help build out that ecosystem. And then the last cherries on top have been volunteering with UPOP as a mentor, as well as CCLP, which I learn a lot from the mentees that I work with as well. But it's also super reflective for me to talk with the next generation of engineers and leaders.
Great, thank you so much. It's so nice to hear of so much diversity in all of your volunteer experiences. That's great. So now that we've learned a little bit more about your work as volunteers and the organizations that you have supported, can you please share with us how these opportunities have led to professional development and whether this was intentional and you started out this way or it just developed into that along the way? Stephen, let's start with you.
Yeah, great, Maribel. So for me, professional development has always been accidental. As a result of being a UPOP mentor, interacting with not only the students, who were mainly sophomores in the range of 19 years old, that was my rude initiation into the world of social media. And so I learned a lot from them, but also my fellow mentors who were in a wide variety of fields. And I will say professional development does not end with theoretical retirement. So even though in theory I retired April 1st, 2018, as a result of relationships I developed with fellow mentors, I'm now on 2 biotech board of directors and made some great connections for other people in my field to actually find funding for their early biotech companies. And it was simply as the happy accident of working with other mentors who were happy to learn about my background and vice versa, me learning about their backgrounds. So as I said, professional development does not end with retirement. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us. And it was purely as a result of volunteering for work in an organization at MIT, which is the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, and also the Gordon Engineering Leadership Program, and now something called GradEL, which are great vehicles for giving back to MIT. The only caveat I have is that we expect the mentors to actually contribute to these programs. So as we would say in the old Saturday Night Live, it's gonna cost you.
Thanks, Stephen. Those are some great programs. Katya, can you share some of your experiences?
Sure. I'll focus on 2 things, and similar to Steve, both of them were inadvertent professional development opportunities for me, but looking back were super interesting and helpful. So the first one is recruiting. Recruiting for a lot of the different groups that I'm involved with. When you recruit volunteers, you have no financial strings, you have no legal strings to require these people to do things. So it really makes it, you really have to figure out what motivates that specific individual and what is, a fitting thing that they can work on as part of your group. For example, like the MIT Alumni Club of San Diego. Now, and this really translates for me for startup work and working, for example, with interns in really being very sharp as to what that person really cares about and sort of guiding them more to work on those challenges. And of course, in a more like traditional corporate setting, you can pay them, you have all the other stuff, but it's so much more impactful if you really find what they're super passionate about. And the other thing is, motivating folks. So with the MIT Club of San Diego, we've been making strides over the last year to really grow out the reach in the local community. And there's a lot of different groups, as you can imagine, young alumni, people who are here to do their PhDs at the University of California, San Diego, folks who are doing startups. There's so many different interests, both from the alumni, to try to really engage them in, what sort of events or programming do you have to have them attend, as well as from the board, how do you build out and make these positions for volunteers? Again, very similar to the corporate environment, that match up with the community needs. So we've initiated different tracks on the program. So programs used to be 1 or 2 people, and now we have multiple tracks from entrepreneurship to alumni to more social activities. And that's been really fun to see both the volunteers grow as well as reach out to very different groups within the community.
Thanks. I think at one point we all nodded our heads that we can all relate to some of those experiences in recruiting members. Jazlyn, can you share next?
Similar to Stephen and Katya, I definitely inadvertently developed, gained professional development skills along the way. My initial was never a thought in my mind when I initially started volunteering, and it just happened along the way. Particularly with the MIT Club. And you know what, I have to say, even with Latinas in STEM, my networking skills have developed. Just the ability to have small talk, quickly engage with people, just not get over that uneasiness. I mean, I know many of us suffer from like that, walking into a room and just, what am I gonna say? Who am I gonna talk to? I don't know anyone. To now I could just walk into a room and go up to anyone and talk to them and just about anything. Meeting management, I honestly, serving on the board of the MIT Club of Northern New Jersey, just, was again, one of those inadvertent skills that I utilize every single day, keeping people on track in a meeting, sticking to an agenda, writing meeting minutes, and making sure we stay on topic. God knows that when a bunch of MIT alums get together, we can certainly get off topic, just, be passionate about a certain topic and just go off tangent. So learning to keep people on track, getting through a meeting was certainly a great skill to learn, especially in a room full of people, that are intimidating. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was the youngest person in the room, and I'm looking at the rest of the board as these people that have accomplished so much in their careers. And I would think initially that I did not belong there. Like, how can I be in the same room with these, incredible people? And 2 years later, I mean, they're lifelong friends. I now talk to them. They're friends. They're people I could pick up the phone and talk to and about anything. When I need advice, last year before the pandemic, a couple of the board members had come out for an alumni event, and we met up for dinner, which is great. And I just, that was such an invaluable skill, and just inadvertently really helped build my confidence. I know that after graduating from MIT, my confidence was through the gutter. There was no way that I thought I was deserving of anything, nor did I think I was the smartest person in the room. It took definitely years to rebuild that confidence. And part of it was actually serving on that board and just having the opportunity to engage with all of these alumni. And I'll say, Katya, being an EC really helped with interviewing skills. So as a project manager, we hire people, and I have to bring on people onto my team. I have to sit and interview them. And being an EC, I kind of, really learned to ask certain questions, understand, just look for certain things, and really analyze interviewees. And that has been an invaluable skill set that, I apply to my job now. And finally, the strategic and annual, and any future planning for an organization. Having to do that, again, for the Club of Northern New Jersey, it's a skill set that I now am able to bring to my company.
Great, so many fantastic experiences. I will add, having participated in Latinas in STEM events, public speaking, because public speaking to groups of all sizes. Colleen, can you share with us some of your experiences?
Like my colleagues, I didn't choose my volunteer work based on what I thought it could do for me professionally. And it really came home because one of the projects I decided to do that once my daughter went to college was that maybe I want to go back to work. Now I have so much more time. Everybody's out of the house that I can, kind of focus back on me, back on my career. What would I like to do if I could do any job? So being a good MIT person, I researched, got my resume together. I thought I had a great resume. And I ran it through one of those resume AIs that pick up keywords and themes in your resume. And based on that, describe what kind of job this resume is seeking. And my result was clerical work. And I thought, well, that is strange because mostly, even though I haven't chosen jobs for professional development, every one of them, I have used technology to support the mission of the organization. And I think the work that I did with technology was a little bit more than clerical work. So I decided to go with a resume consultant to help me get my resume into shape. And during the interview, one of the big insights that I got from several sessions where we spoke about my work experience and what I was looking for was that in your resume, when you describe your volunteer work, you start with the organization and how you served that organization. When you describe your job experience, you talk about your knowledge and skills that you brought to an organization. So she encouraged me and helped me, and we rewrote my resume, volunteer work, as though I had been hired and paid to do these jobs. Like if this were a job I had to apply to, what made me the best candidate for that job, and what were the skills and knowledge that I brought that were unique to me that's helped and pushed this organization further. And it's very interesting because you usually just think about your job experience as what gets you to your next job, and your volunteer experience shows you're a well-rounded, nice person that gives to the community. But it really was an important paradigm shift for me to think of my volunteer work as something that was professional development, but also learn the language to communicate that to a prospective employer. So that was, and when the amateur role came up as web committee, I said, aha, professional development. I would want to do that anyway, but I thought, now I look at what I'm doing with amateur differently than I did some of my other volunteer work. I still serve, but I also am keeping in the background how this supports me professionally.
That's great. I love that skills-focused approach to your volunteer work. Fantastic. So for our alumni listening today, how can they be, on one hand, strategic in their choice of volunteer roles if they plan, to use them as an opportunity for growth, and also for current volunteer leaders, how can they support alumni looking to do this, even if they don't have a current opportunity that exists in their club or group or organization? Can you offer some practical advice? And Colleen, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, well, one of the things that I would like to emphasize is that if you have something that you'd like to do or an area you would like to develop, hashtag ask. So for example, when I first started with the Amateur Web Committee, I'd only been there a few months and I did not have the level of permissions and admin training to really be set loose on their website. But I was desperate to find something to do. So I found this page that hadn't been updated since 2010. And it was a bulleted list of milestones in women's history from 1871, when Ellen Swallow Richards entered MIT, to 2010. And I thought, hey, it's 2019. I could research and expand this list. And it's Amada's 120th anniversary year. So this is something I can do to help the organization, and I don't need all the web skills yet to do it. So I went and I found a a data visualization package that took those bullets and allowed me to add media and text and links so that the existing 40 bullets could kind of come alive. And then with the help of the WIP committee and their mentorship and their connections, I got to speak to other alumni who were very active in preserving Amida history or had been part of some of this Amida history, or had known, like somebody who actually knew Catherine Dexter McCormick, to help advise and edit this timeline that I created. And the really amazing part is within about less than 2 months, the president of Amida was at, Mary Jane Daly was at a meeting with the Alumni Association. They were discussing, hey, what could we do to promote Amida during its 120th? And MJ opened her computer and said, well, we got this timeline that one of our people has done. And the Alumni Association just grabbed it and they ran with it. And it ended up being featured at a happy hour, like those big screen TVs. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, are my graphics going to survive? Big screen TV. So I was sitting there with my HD TV and trying to, get the Mac to display on that so I could see which graphics might have fallen apart on me. But that was really exciting. So it was really neat. So that would never have happened if I didn't have the ask. And the reason this ask is significant is my ideal job would be to work in a library, in technical services, or digital archives. So creating an interactive story of the history of women at MIT is not only job experience, but it's actually content, so that if an interviewer or prospective employer is looking, I can say, go click on this timeline on our website and you can see my work that I did with the help of these committees. So it not only gave me some experience in doing something that I want to do professionally, but it also allowed me to contribute to the organization. And I think that when you join an organization, remember, you joined that because there was something in you that connected to them. So they're going to be a lot more receptive to that big ask, maybe, than an employer might be. So I would encourage you that if there's something you'd like to develop and you see an opportunity, ask, and just ask. And it's amazing, where that ask can sometimes take you. So, and I think Katya was also going to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, I like the ask thing. It's so relevant to the just regular corporate environment too, but just proposing and asking. And my gosh, as the person who's receiving the ask, you're like, yes, finally, someone stood up. So last week, I talked with an MIT alumni who's also a vet in San Diego. I'm trying to find a good position for them in the club, and the person's super excited about veteran affairs. And for me, it's my husband's a vet, a current Navy, will be a vet soon, and I was just like, wow, this is such a segment in San Diego we just haven't really supported or even thought about. So I was so excited to hear this person's interest and excitement about it. So as the club, of course, on the other side of your question, Maribel, as the club, let's, we're trying to figure out, okay, where does this person, how do we get this person support to organize? Let's start off with just one event, get them all the logistical administrative support that the club can provide, because we do events all the time and it's sort of very easy for us, but really tap that person's passion for doing stuff and really supporting that segment of the community. So, huge lesson, I think, as a volunteer, going to my earlier point, there is no sort of money or contractual obligation. So as a volunteer, you're never going to find time for stuff that you feel like you should do, but aren't really excited about. So find the stuff that you're really passionate about. And that might be meeting people locally. That might be supporting, current students through UPOP or through GEL, or, interviewing and seeing the excitement of the next generation as an EC. So the two starting points I would suggest, that I suggest for local alumni when I talk with them, to either recruit them for the club or just meet them. Educational counselor who said this many, many times, being an AC is such an easy, small commitment to start with, to just get familiar. And then the club, the clubs usually have very structured positions, but then depending on the club size, there's usually committees, or you can just do a one-off event. And it's so easy. And again, the club, for the clubs that I've worked with for the most part, are very supportive and excited to have you be proactive with it. Again, from the club side, so just to wrap up, again, from the other perspective, not from the volunteers, but from the ones who organize opportunities. Last ALC, virtual ALC, I attended a session, and I think it was Club of Washington, DC, and they talked about how they set up this data role for the memberships group. And I had this big aha moment of My gosh, yes, we've always had a VP of memberships role, but this person has to be both super social and also look at the numbers. And it's really rare to find a person that's very excited about both / can do all of those things required for both. So I actually split that role up and found what we call like a data cruncher volunteer for the club. And this guy just like really loves numbers, and he does it for his day job. Has helped just really go through and find the stats. So that's my suggestion. Think outside the box, really find stuff that really suits specific volunteers.
Thank you both. I think such fantastic, really applicable examples. So thank you. Thinking outside of the more traditional volunteer roles, we have the club treasurer, the secretary, the president, etc. What types of opportunities might exist, or what volunteer roles would be on your wish list? Jazlyn, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So this is, some of these ideas are for people that are pressed for time, and God knows that we can all be pressed for time, managing our careers, our personal lives, families, and all that. And sometimes thinking about taking on a role on a board might seem too daunting, or committing to, serving, even as an EC, which is probably the least amount of time, it's still a time commitment over, certain number of months. So some of the things that you can do, like if you really want to volunteer, but you're pressed for time, is call newly admitted students. The admissions office is always looking for, alumni to give their perspective. So maybe you take on a list, and Maribel, you've talked about this with Avanza, how we ended up doing with Avanza and LAMIT, calling newly admitted Latino students. And really what it was an afternoon commitment of calling, a handful of students, congratulating them, and then talking to them about the Institute, about, what your experience was. And it's just a great experience and very fulfilling. Another thing you can do is, similar to what Katia and Colleen were talking about previously, is looking at the skills, maybe looking at the needs of your local alumni club, or going onto the alumni website, checking out all the different groups that we have a need for volunteers, and seeing if there's like a one-off thing that you can do. Maybe it's speaking, right? Our clubs all over the world are looking for speakers. Great thing now that we're using Zoom is that it makes it very convenient for you to kind of fit it into your schedule to speak. And it helps develop your speaking skills, right? Your speaking and presentation skills. Something that we did, and Katia, very similar to the Club of Washington, the Club of Northern New Jersey, we were constantly trying to think of what are some of the one-off tasks that we can get volunteers for. And sometimes what we would do is, hey, would you like to take pictures? Going to an event, want to be the person that takes pictures and sends it over to our communications team so that we can post them on social media and our website. The other one was offering up your home for an event. So we would do our annual holiday party was always at an alumni home. And so that was a one-time commitment. You would get the full support of the club with helping with the planning and all that. We also had a wine and food club. And so same thing, alumni would offer up their homes, their backyards, so that we can all gather. So those are kind of like those one-off things. And finally, Advisors Hub. So the great thing about the Advisors Hub, you can actually set your availability and what are some of the skills you're able to provide. Mentoring, resume review, career advice. Personally, when I decided in 2019 to start looking for a new job, I went onto the Advisors Hub and connected with an alumni that was also a Course One alumni. He reviewed my resume, provided tons of guidance, great advice, and even connected me with the current company that I am working for. So it was just phenomenal, just this of someone that I just met through the Advisors Hub and how much he just helped me with my career and where I am today. So you could probably make that same impact with just a one-time volunteer opportunity.
Thanks. Yeah, you mentioned many great examples. You mentioned the Lamit Call program. I think I can share that it took me about 30 minutes per student to call. So, an hour to an hour and a half, and it had a huge impact. So, I think that's definitely, if you're crunched for time, that's definitely doable. Stephen, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, so we can always volunteer to interview potential students, although the admissions office says I scared too many of them away. But some of them actually did end up enrolling at MIT. Another great vehicle for working with MIT is with the development office, and got to put a plug in for them. They can hook you up with other opportunities. They might hit you up for money, but that is not a prerequisite for working with them. It's been very gratifying for me to work with students. I find that I get as much, if not more, out of my interactions with them than that they do with me. But I will say a lot of the students that I mentored, I am still in contact with over the last 7 years. And sadly, some of them broke my heart and went to Harvard for their graduate degrees. But, I think they'll still do okay.
Well, thank you. And I think I'm going to share my screen. Jazz, you mentioned this for alumni that are interested in volunteering. Let me just focus on this for a second. There we go. For the alumni that are interested in volunteering, but you're not sure what roles are available, the alumni website actually has this really helpful website. I think the link is going to be added to the chat as well. But when you go to the alumni website, it's actually broken up by a lot of different areas. And so, there's different levels, varying levels of commitment based on areas of interest. So, we mentioned a couple that were, or a few that were short term, maybe some of them are a little bit longer term, but, if you want to engage with MIT students, here's a series of different opportunities. And, UPOP is mentioned on there, which is listed on there, which was mentioned earlier, Women's League English Conversation class. So if you are interested at all in becoming a volunteer, I encourage you to check out this website. Lots of really good information. There's also a form that you are welcome to fill out to express your interest. The link is going to be added to the chat for this as well. And if you fill out the form, which I think is really important, and I think, this website is fantastic because it breaks it up by areas of interest. But one of the things we were talking about is, looking at skills as well. And so by filling out the form, it can connect you with somebody, volunteer services staff member that might be able to connect you with, an organization that could really utilize those skills. So definitely check this out. There's a lot of really great information. If this is the first time you've heard of being an EC, an educational counselor, there's information listed there, and why you might want to volunteer, and all sorts of different wonderful volunteer opportunities for MIT. And we've mentioned some other opportunities outside of MIT, but lots of wonderful opportunities to volunteer through MIT. So now we'd like to, I think there's been some questions coming in through the chat and the Q&A. So we're going to take some of those questions now for our panelists. Okay. And again, I'm going to encourage you again to fill out the form, because I think it's a really wonderful way to get connected to somebody in volunteer services that can help guide you depending on what your interests might be. Okay. So let's see. Great discussion. Yay. How can I leverage my time as an educational counselor to get more opportunities in my career? Have you found ways to do this? I'm trying to get into journalism, so being able to interview people is important, but is there anything beyond that? And that was from Shiva, and she was course 9, class of '05. Thanks, Shiva, for the question. So leveraging EC time.
I can jump in here. I actually have a friend who was super on the research track, but now has pivoted to journalism. And their journey was, they were part of the Club of Northern California, and they did podcasts through the Club of Northern California as, I guess, like a way to sort of practice and get material and content out of there, not necessarily EC, but now they're like, you know, actually full steam on working on their journalism career. So I thought that was an interesting way to use the club to actually practice and get content out there that you can show, I guess, future potential employers.
Yeah, similarly, you know, aside from podcasts, you can also write some blog posts. Writing content for the club website is certainly a huge need. And also joining, if all the clubs have communication teams, whether it's a VP of communications that's sending out emails, or they might have a sub team that's helping with maintaining all the content and communication to the members. So that might be a way for you to get involved and practice your skills.
Yeah, and you know, doing a podcast with the MIT faculty, and they're not only brilliant, but they have fantastic egos, and they're always happy to do podcast interviews.
Great.
Going back to the question about ECs and leveraging the fact that you do a certain number of interviews every year, and you have to write a report. You have to write the student's story. It's not just a fill in the blank. You have to decide what content you're looking for, because MIT does not give you a form that says, please ask for these things. So one, I would say, you know, mention that you process this number of students, you know, per semester as part of your role. So it can show your productivity. And the second part, if you're comfortable, the EC office grades us at the end of each cycle. So if you're comfortable sharing that, you can say, hey, I routinely get, you know, out of a score of 5, my average EC report receives a 4, a 5. And I'm sure the EC office, if you needed to produce verification for something like that, I'm sure they'd be willing to help and be a reference for the fact that you do produce interviews that are extremely useful for the application process. So, you know, you may have to open yourself up a little bit, but, you know, share what's your average grade for your thing and how many. I mean, I've spoken to ECs that do just 2 or 3 per semester, and then I've spoken to some that do 40. And I'm always 40. Oh, you know, oh, I mean, how do you even, you know, it takes me 2 hours to write up each, you know, report. You know, I can't imagine doing 40 of those. So, you know, so kind of turn it around, say, well, what's my productivity? Again, what skills are you using? What's my productivity? How many am I doing? And if there's an evaluation, how is it being evaluated? How do you rank among your MIT peers? I mean, being ranked among MIT, you are not the least among, you know, men and women. It's a pretty competitive group.
Yes, wonderful advice. And I love that. Bring it back to the skills. Okay, great. Next question, thinking back on your volunteer journey, what advice would you give to those recent graduates looking for a first step to getting involved with MIT? Would you have done anything different becoming a volunteer, knowing what you know now?
Well, I think we've already heard it, Maribel. It's working with the local clubs, which doesn't even have to be a volunteer role, just to participate and learn what's available, especially, you know, for recently graduated alumni. I know in DC, there were opportunities, New York, New Jersey as well. But first, you know, learn who your fellow graduates are in your local area, and it won't cost you anything except your time.
For me, if I can jump in on this one too, I would say, looking back on it, I would have gotten involved earlier. I thought, oh, I don't have the time that's required, when, you know, we talked about several examples that weren't very time intensive. And in my mind, I just made an assumption about how intensive it would be and then decided to wait. So I would have check those assumptions and start it earlier.
Yeah.
To that point, literally, it is as easy as a lot of the clubs struggle with, reaching out to a lot of the younger alumni, the regional clubs, I mean. Literally, if there's a young alumni who's like, hey, I'm happy to organize a happy hour every 2 months, obviously, post-pandemic times, but even virtually, or just like a virtual board games night every 2 months, I'd be so excited to hear that. They can basically invite sort of their friends. We can help out with the logistics, and then sort of their friends bring other friends, and eventually that young community grows. So it is, basically you have the infrastructure to organize and build your own community if you'd like that.
Mm-hmm. And you can really just get started with, every regional club has an MIT 10, and MIT 10 groups are doing events all the time. So start off by just attending an event, just reiterating what Stephen said, just attend, see what it's like, and then step up, like Katia said.
One of my favorite closing the circle stories is the very first student I ever interviewed also got into MIT. So, that really set a high bar for me. Like, oh, I have all these great kids. They're all going to get in. But what was really fun was Sam was the first student I ever interviewed. He had come in from a cross-country meet. He had a cold. It was amazing that he even got to the interview. But the really amazing thing is about 5 years later, I'm sitting there checking volunteers in at my Science Olympiad tournament. And there is Sam. And he said, hey, I graduated. And he said, I'm back in the Houston area and I saw you were holding this event. And I thought, here I am. How can I be of help? So it was really kind of fun to see that somebody I had interviewed some years before, and it was the very first person I'd ever interviewed. So I remember him. I keep in contact with him on LinkedIn. That he then came back to, my home region and specifically stepped up to help with an event that, that I was running. And the second thing is I would, think about what your passions are. If you always choose your volunteer service by where your passions are at that moment, you will never regret a single thing that you do. So if you're a young MIT graduate and say your passion is Dungeons and Dragons, well, maybe there are other, people in your region that would love to do a virtual Dungeons and Dragons event. And that might be some old folkies like me whose kids do this and like, hey, I'd love to try it, So, so if there's something you're truly passionate about, you are an amazing dungeon master and you create these amazing stories or one-shots, go for it. Or maybe you're really good at, card tricks. If you've got a skill and a passion that you love, approach your local chapter and they will very likely reel you right in, because that's how I ended up doing tournaments. I said, they said, hey, what would you like to see us do? I said, local tournaments. And Marilyn Caesar said, great, when can you start? Like, I wasn't thinking about organizing. I just wanted one to attend. But, they're usually very excited to expand their programming. Or you're a robotics person, First Robotics, sponsor a First Robotics group through your local MIT regional chapter. So whatever your passion is, bring it to your local chapter and say, hi, I've got a programming idea and I'm willing to run with it. So go for that too.
Great. This next one is for Jazz. Hi, Jazz. What programs is Latinas in STEM featuring during the pandemic? Are there volunteer opportunities? There you go, specific.
Thank you. And I see that's from Benigno. Thanks for asking. Yes, just like every other organization, we needed to pivot during the pandemic. And actually, one of our signature program, our Latinas in STEM 101 conference, which is a one-day conference that we have held in person since 2013 across the nation, where we have students at the K-12 level and their parents come together for a day, and we inspire them with hands-on activities for the students, with live professionals in STEM, and we give bilingual workshops for parents, talking to them about what is STEM, why STEM, the college and financial aid process, and how can they inspire their kids to continue along the path in STEM. So our last conference was actually scheduled just before literally the week that everything shut down, March 12th, 2020, sorry. And actually it was March 14th, sorry, is that Saturday. And unfortunately we had to cancel it. So that was our first pivot that we needed to take. And so what we decided to do is to bring our content that we've been offering all these years online. And so there is an absolute huge opportunity there for volunteers. Anyone that would like to share a hands-on activity and videotape it, and we can add it to our content. We are looking for bilingual, some Spanish-speaking content. So anyone who speaks Spanish and would like to do some hands-on activities that parents can do at home or teachers can do with their students. Additionally, My STEM Journey. So one of the things that we like to do are called My STEM Journey, and this is where professionals share their STEM journey and as a way to inspire others to pursue these careers in STEM. So if anyone wants to give their time and share their STEM journey, we actually have two ways of sharing it. One is as a video on our Latinas in STEM 101 portal. The other option is by on a monthly basis, we're featuring a different STEM career in our social media feed. And so we always interview a woman in STEM about their career. And then finally, opportunities to engage with our members. On a monthly basis, we are having our basically what we call our Sip and Learns. It's a get together once a month, and members tend to share stuff, but we are definitely open to ideas. So if you want to share, whether it's something about your career, professional development, obviously huge benefit, any job opportunities, scholarships, fellowships, all ears, feel free to reach out. We will take it all.
Great.
Mhm.
So many good opportunities there. Okay, this next question asks, any additional advice for someone who is interested in re-entering the workforce after taking time off for over 20 years to raise 3 children? I have been involved volunteering in school parent associations and other organizations. Colleen, I know you spoke a little bit about this one. You want to take this one?
Yes, it's just same thing, 20 years as a school library aide myself. So I think the most important thing to do is think about what job you want to get back to and think about what skills that job is going to need. So for example, when I realized that I love data and I would love to be in technical services in a library, my family joked that I actually took a gap year, my daughter's freshman year in college. And I went and through Coursera, which is fairly inexpensive, I went and I took classes in Python where I learned about data visualization and then R programming. And then, you know, I shared the story of my poor misfit original resume that had me very much as a clerk, because often the jobs that you do as PTA, if you think about it, it does seem like glorified clerk work sometimes. But I would definitely recommend working either with somebody that you have in the field as a mentor, and the Advisors Hub looks like a great place to find a mentor for somebody who might be in your field, but also take advantage of a professional resume service. Because the second part of that is, again, when you serve, you do it because you liked what you do. You were passionate about supporting your kids' schools and their activities. You don't really think about what you get back for it. And the resume consultant said, well, did you ever get any awards? I said, yeah, I got a few. She said, well, promote that. And there were times where I said, well, no, it wasn't that big a deal. And she said, wait, you took this coach who couldn't even handle his own voicemail and you created a communication strategy for him? Like, well, yes. She said, well, that's worth promoting. So, you know, it's really wonderful to have that neutral party who's not a family member, because your family member loves you and they never want to hurt your feelings. That will say, well, okay, you know, that's not as strong, but this one is. And that person will kind of push you a little bit to promote maybe a part of you that you didn't think was as big a deal. It's just something you do. So I definitely recommend, you know, getting a mentor who is in the field that you want to get into. And I did have somebody in library sciences that I worked with at the high school where I volunteered for my daughter's library. And then get a neutral party to review your resume and provide feedback on it, and then give it a try. And if you really want to do some reading, the Amateur Oral History program, and I'll put the link in for this particular history, has this wonderful woman called Leona Zarsky, who graduated from MIT in 1941. She went on to become an MD. She was one of the surgeons that pioneered open heart surgery, like in the 50s. And at some point she made the decision that she had 3 children under 10, that maybe it was time to stay home with them. She had a moment. And when she went back to work, her oral history really talks about her journey as an elite surgeon, as a woman in a field of men at that time in the 40s and 50s. And then after her kids were, ready for her to maybe take on something more personal, her journey to what she ultimately ended up doing. And I'll put the link for the transcript of her interview. But she's one of my favorite people in the oral history program, because her advice is, for the youngsters, no matter what you do, make sure you have something for every single year. Don't have a gap, because if you have a gap, in math, those graphs, we got that discontinuity, all they see is the discontinuity. So didn't help me, looking back 20 years, but going forward for my kids, I see, make sure if you come out of the professional field, make sure you have something for every year, even if it's not necessarily what your profession is, have something to show that you are contributing to your community and to the world in some way.
Great. I'll have to check out
that link
oral
in
history.
for you.
Yeah. And you may have answered this question already. The next question asks, are there any mentorship programs for MIT alumni? And I'm not sure if this is to become a mentor or to get a mentor, but it seems like the Advisors Hub is good for both. You can sign up to be a mentor or receive mentorship, but are there any others that panelists want to mention?
Well, Maribel, we discussed, UPOP, the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, which is a great vehicle for mentorship. And I know that, we're continuing to look for, mentors of diverse backgrounds, although the pool is now pretty good. But I would suggest people look into that at all parts of their, postgraduate careers. For me, I found it very gratifying. And as I already said, it was great in connecting with other fellow mentors. So I think that's, and, in addition to the GEL program and now Grad EL, I think any graduates would find this very edifying.
Thanks.
One thing to add, if you're looking for mentors, something that I found a little bit unintuitive probably about 4 years back was, outside of any existing structure. So if you go to the Infinite Connection via your MIT alumni login, you can find all of the alumni from MIT, and there's really helpful filters. So by year, by program, by current company, by location, and it has their @alum.mit.edu email. Plus, you can find those people on LinkedIn. The unintuitive thing was, it's so weird how many MIT alumni are just genuinely excited and open to connect with another MIT alumni. There's something common that we just share, and I've had very high success rates with just cold outreach, being like, hey, I'm a fellow MIT alum, I need help with sort of X, or trying to figure out how to access company Y for my startup as a customer, or really trying to figure out how to do this for my company. Can you share your story about what you've done? I've used the Advisors Hub as well, but some people you just either can't find on there, or it's a very unique search. So just go out into the jungle and see who you can find, because people are very excited and open to chat.
That's a great tip.
We all got through MIT. That's our common bond. There's this, there's a mutual respect and admiration.
Yeah, ask yourself the question, would you rather work for a Harvard grad or have a Harvard grad work for you?
Yeah, but great tip about the directory. I think there's another resource I think that was added in the chat for specifically startup or business advice, and that's the MIT Venture Mentor Services. So great. I think that might be all the questions. Oh, wait, one more. Let's see. I graduated with a PhD in material science, but left research 15 years ago to teach high school. I would now love to get back as a volunteer into research, but change into the field of biosciences or at a hospital. What advice do you have?
Well, there are several small biotechs that MIT helped get up and going. There's a program called Sandbox that some of my colleagues are part of in terms of startup biotechs. One of them was Moderna, by the way, which is doing okay last time I looked. Interestingly, they didn't want to go into infectious diseases, but I guess they learned. But yeah, I mean, there are a variety of programs for entrepreneurship early. And frankly, if you've got an idea, there are people at MIT as part of this program that will help provide you with some mentorship.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm just double checking to make sure I didn't miss any of the any questions. And the sandbox, the link to the sandbox, to MIT Sandbox, was just added to the chat.
Another sort of odd resource too. So there's a few Facebook and LinkedIn groups for different communities. Like there's an MIT Founders Facebook group, and I'm working on building out the Slack community. There's also an MIT Women Trans Non-Binary Affiliate Network Facebook group too. And I've personally benefited from like posting in some of these communities, being like, hey, this is a problem I'm struggling with. And then people sort of come up and are happy to share their experiences or hop on calls. And I've seen different people also share like, hey, I'm looking to do this career transition. Has anyone done the same? Can we chat about this? Do you have any advice? So look for some of those more grassroots things as well.
That's a great group. Great tip. Okay, the next question is there a way to connect with any of the panelists after? So would you all be open to connecting with some of the attendees after?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
LinkedIn and then the alumni directory.
Exactly. We are all on the alumni directory. That's how they found us.
That's true.
So if you get our names from the biography page, you'll be able to find us on the alumni directory, and it gives at least the Alumni Association email, which we have forwarded to private email accounts. You can also find me on the Amado pages too.
All right. Well, and I would also like to remind everyone that there will be a survey that's going to be sent out after this session, and there's going to be some of the resources that were mentioned included in that on the survey. So I think I saw a question about downloading the chat. I'm guessing it's to capture some of those resources. So great. I think there's people posting in the chat as well about other volunteer opportunities. So for the participants, be sure to check that out. I'm sure there's many wonderful, wonderful organizations with other MIT alums. But I think that might be all of the questions if I didn't miss any. Let me just do one more check. Okay, I think that's it. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you so much to our alumni that are watching and joined us for the session today. As a reminder, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the YouTube site in about a week. But again, there's going to be a survey that's coming out after the webinar. I encourage you to fill it out, and your feedback is really important. The MIT Alumni Association really wants to continue to strive for excellence in the programming. And so it will also include links to the volunteer page that I shared, and the link to that forum that I also mentioned earlier, so that you can get in contact with volunteer services. And so, yeah, and the survey will also have a link to the Google Doc with the resources covered today. So with that, thank you everyone so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.